Good afternoon, Brian Barrett signing in. Jacob? Brian Barrett here.
Hi, Brian, it's Jacob. I'm going to turn on the camera and microphone in a couple of minutes.
They didn't turn the speakers on yet. Oh, who's that lady? Carisex here.
Hey, just
Barrett,
so we know,
Pride, and
everybody
Littleheim are here. I don't know who this
everybody can hear what you're saying, so if you're not participating... Yeah, just letting everybody know, if you're not participating in the moment, please mute your microphone. We're gonna... Well,
you just looked at the clock. Yeah. Okay, time to turn the speakers on. Here we go.
Gary?
Mm-hmm.
Gary? No. For some reason, we can hear her. She can't hear us.
All right. Well. Can anyone hear us in the meeting room?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What's going on? Thank you. All right, so, we're gonna get started in a moment here, but just so everybody on Zoom knows, please have your microphones muted until you're participating. Yeah, Brian's on. Brian, can you hear us? Thank you. Okay, it is 4:00 p.m., so I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a special work session of the Smithfield Township Board of Supervisors. I would like to proceed today with the Water Gap Capital Partners LLC conditional use application. Ron, would you like to?
All right, the last time we met was a week ago today, and what was at that time considered final testimony was presented with respect to the conditional use application by both sides. I'm going to just say something now which is backtracking a little bit. When there were discussions last week with respect to various questions and various objections being made, I got caught up in the thrust of the hearing and forgot that in public hearings in conditional use applications, that the rules of evidence generally do not apply, but irrelevant and other testimony is not to be considered. So in areas where I might have sustained an objection as to hearsay, I'm not quite sure if I was correct in that regard, although obviously we can't unring bells and it's kind of hard to backtrack, but I want to make that known for the record so it does not appear that I was attempting to be unduly obstreperous with respect to questions and answers. That being said, today was a day for any argument to be made by both sides, or all sides, I suppose I should say, with respect to this conditional use matter. I don't know, since the hearing is still open, we haven't closed it, if either side would want to present any additional testimony. Obviously, that wasn't the plan for today, but I know that there may have been an email or two that may have come in or out since last time that may have spurred a question or two. I'm not sure, but in any event, as far as I'm concerned, we are here for closing arguments unless there is something that I'm missing.
I don't think you're missing anything. I'd say if you want to determine the order as in the past.
Well, normally the person who has the burden goes. Here you have two burdens in effect. That if the applicant shows that they have met the conditional use requirements, if you will, then the burden shifts to the objectors to show that there is an issue with respect to health, welfare, safety, et cetera. So what I would probably do is I would suggest we have Mr. Wolf go first since he's the applicant. We have the objectors go second, and then we allow Mr. Wolf brief rebuttal and the objectors brief rebuttal. This way both sides have a chance to argue twice, and then we're ready to close the hearing unless something else changes.
Mr. Wolf, would you like to proceed?
Actually, yes, I think excuse me, before we do that, I'm sorry, Amy, but I just want to make sure that that's what everybody wants to do, because at the last, apologize, never happened. At the last hearing, Mr. Lovenheim, when remarks were, at least I interpreted, you wanted to get some more information, maybe had some more questions.
I do have some questions, but I'd rather hear the closing arguments and then ask and to see if they're answered in your closing arguments.
Okay, because once the record's closed, then you're not going to be able to go back and ask any of the witnesses that.
Well, as I say, as soon as you finish your arguments, I'll ask the chairman to allow me to ask some questions. If they're not answered.
The questions are going to have to be answered by the lawyers, not the witnesses. The record's closed. All right, very fine. Sorry, that's okay. In terms of a
closing statement, this is a bit unusual. I would actually, I have a request from, Mr. Schwinn that he would actually like to give the closing. I would like to be able to address in rebuttal, asking to be able to bifurcate. He would actually like to prepare his own, and address the supervisors in his own closing statement.
Well, wait,
This is not, closing is not evidence. This is a closing statement.
well, your client is represented by counsel, and counsel is supposed to do such things as closing statements and examine. We certainly wouldn't have let him examine any witnesses. And to the extent that he makes a statement, I don't know what he's gonna say, but there's a good chance it's gonna be hybrid argument / testimony, and I don't think that's appropriate. I think if he wants to say anything else, keep the hearing open, put him under oath, let him say what he has to say, let it be subject to cross-examination, and then we can do the closing argument.
This is Marshall Landers. I agree with Mr. Ferrari. I mean, it's never heard of where a client makes a closing argument, because that's just more testimony. And would have the right to cross-examine. So if Mr. Wolf wants to make a closing argument, he should make it. Mr. Slim has no position to make a closing argument.
Well, it seems we have the option of allowing him to make a statement under oath, or allowing him to give the closing. One way or the other, either he's going to give the closing, or he's going to read a statement under oath.
I think the key issue, I agree with both Jim and Marshall, but I think the key issue is, and I say this with all respect to Mr. Schwinn, but clients almost always, when they talk, even when they do closings pro se, and we've all had this, stray into giving evidence. It's almost inevitable. So I don't believe he should be allowed to give the closing. I believe the better way, if the board wants, would be allow him to give a statement under oath, which then we could cross-examine. Because if he gets into evidentiary matters and we're not allowed to cross-examine, we're put at a great distance.
And that also, in my opinion, that should be part of the evidentiary hearing and not part of the closing argument.
Given that, I think we can proceed to having him under oath for that. You can feel free to take that seat again if you'd like to.
And just so we're clear, since this is a statement under oath, obviously it'll be subject to cross-examination, but it will be part of the hearing record as opposed to, I mean, closing arguments are part of the hearing record too, but it's part of the hearing testimony, I guess I should say.
Thank you.
I'll put it again. You do solemnly swear or the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
State your name for the record.
Joseph A. Schlim.
Mr. Schwinn, in conjunction with the hearings that have taken place before the supervisor here, you have a statement which you would like to present to the supervisors in conjunction with the conditional use application.
I do. Well, first I want to thank the Board of Supervisors for holding these hearings, for your patience and your professionalism and your thoughtfulness. It's been a long process, almost 2 years. It's been a valuable one because I think we've all learned a lot. We've learned that there's a growing health crisis in the United States when it comes to mental and behavioral health. Over 48,000 deaths from suicide last year, more than 81,000 deaths from overdose, and over 95,000 deaths related to alcohol. We learned that the law and the courts have found the diseases of drug addiction and alcoholism to be disabilities, equal in weight and consideration and accommodation of physical impairment. We've learned that there are 3 federal statutes, the Rehabilitation Act, the Fair Housing Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibit discrimination on the basis of a handicap and protect the civil rights and the fair housing rights of those who suffer from addiction. And sadly, we also learned that the stigma against people who suffer from the disease of addiction still is very strong. We heard it consistently during these proceedings, in the public comments and testimony, and we've seen it used as the basis for arguments and allegations against us by the opposing attorneys. These comments and allegations could be disheartening to some people, but I am emboldened to carry on. I am not trying to paint myself as a victim. I'm not a victim, but I do know that the facts, the truth, and the law are on our side when it comes to the integrity of our organization and how it is managed, the appropriateness of this property as a residential treatment center, and the experience and dedication of our medical and clinical staff. From our meeting, we know there's still confusion and misunderstanding about Water Gap Wellness and our outpatient treatment center, Water Gap Wellness Center. And I want to provide you with more details so you have a clear and true understanding of each company. Water Gap Wellness is an inn located at 288 Mountain Road in Smithfield Township, and Water Gap Wellness Center is a licensed outpatient treatment provider located in East Stroudsburg. The inn, as its policy and as required by law, does not discriminate in providing accommodations to anyone. It complies with all state rules and regulations, and it pays its lodging and property taxes. And its guests receive no treatment at the inn. Water Gap Wellness Center is a licensed treatment center that is a few miles away in East Stroudsburg, and that is where and only where treatment is provided for drug, alcohol, and other issues. But as I noted, there is concern in the community about the inn. There's concern about the pharmacy deliveries, the storage of guest medications that is on site, vehicle traffic, and the culture of the inn. These are all unfounded. It's true that pharmacies regularly deliver medications to guests at Water Gap Wellness. Inn guests have valid prescriptions, licensed health professionals, a variety of ailments. Every day throughout our nation, approved necessary prescriptions are being filled and delivered to thousands of Americans. Where else should the pharmacy deliver the medicine than to the residence, albeit temporary, of the person to whom it is prescribed? It's important to note that the medications delivered to Water Gap Wellness are the possessions of the people to whom it is prescribed. They are not the possessions of Water Gap Wellness. Water Gap Wellness does not dispense them. I'll just get some water.
No problem.
Not dispense medications, but we do hold the medications for each of our guests when they come. Medications are stored in individualized baskets in a locked cabinet in a locked room. And this safekeeping is provided regardless of whether the guest showed up with his medications on his first day at the inn or was prescribed it by a doctor during the course of his stay. We maintain a sober living environment at the inn. And what that means is that any guest who arrives at the inn, his or her possessions are searched and subject to confiscation. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, all medications, even including aspirin and vitamins, any products that contain alcohol or other substances that potentially could be harmful to anyone at the inn are confiscated. It's a safe environment, and it's also a sober environment. That's a good thing. It's legal, it's proper, and it's sound. Holding medications, safekeeping, does not change in any way the fact that these medications are not Water Gap Wellness's medicine. They are guest medications. And when it is time for the guest to access their medicine, they go to the window where a Water Gap Wellness employee retrieves the basket, watches the guest take the prescribed dosage, and then returns the basket to its locked cabinet in the locked room. In regards to staff, there's not a single job or function performed at the inn that requires a licensed healthcare professional of any kind. And it's worth noting that there is not a single law or regulation that prevents any of the jobs at the inn from being performed by a licensed practical nurse. With respect to the licensed practical nurse who spoke at the last meeting, this former employee was hired in December of 2019 in anticipation of Water Gap Wellness receiving detox and residential treatment approval, long before I ever thought we would open an outpatient treatment center. And as we discussed in our last meeting, even the signs at our offices were hung with titles in anticipation of our receiving imminent approval for detox and residential treatment. We never made it that far to treatment, so our signs were not accurate, and we took them down. COVID-19 delayed all of our meetings with you, and any action in the courts was delayed until summer. It was, and it continues to be, a very difficult time for everyone. We found a way to adapt, a way to move forward, a way to remain open, a way to keep people gainfully employed and not lay them off. We're still open, but solely as an inn, and a new space was found and renovated a few miles away in East Stroudsburg to provide treatment. This pivot allowed us to save jobs by redefining roles, such as taking on administrative rather than healthcare functions by becoming drivers of vans. Also at our last meeting, there was talk about traffic to and from the inn. You've been presented a traffic study, I think the only traffic study that you have in your possession, that concludes that traffic under our intended use is significantly less than when the property was an active country club. Currently, vans are used to transport people from the inn to the treatment center every morning and every afternoon, 6 days a week. People are transported to the treatment center each day because the treatment center is where treatment is provided. The truck traffic that people speak about certainly relates to the operation of the inn. We're an inn. We feed people, provide them with clean towels and clean sheets. There are no bottlenecks of trucks and traffic at our front gate. Well, you would have witnessed that if you took the extraordinary step to hire a private investigator to watch our operation. However, our inn does provide many jobs, and we continue to invest in our property. With the help of 58 local contractors, we have completely renovated the inn. We're renovating the old golf pro shop building. We added sprinklers in every building, as well as accessibility for the handicapped, and upgraded all utilities and building systems. Plus, we have a team of men working every day to clear the downed trees and debris that have accumulated on our property after 10 years of neglect. But, how does any of this demonstrate our confidence as a treatment provider, our dedication to sound management, our ability to help people who are desperately in need of help, or our culture as an organization? For starters, we created a nurturing and attentive environment at Water Gap Wellness Center in East Stroudsburg by employing experienced treatment professionals. Our partial hospitalization program in East Stroudsburg is JCO certified, which is the gold standard of the primary accreditation organization for healthcare organizations in the United States. Water Gap Wellness Center is licensed by the Pennsylvania Department of Human Resources and the Pennsylvania Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs. Within the last month, we passed our annual inspections and site visits from both agencies. We're one of the few recovery centers in the Northeast that's dually licensed. Since March, Water Gap Wellness Center has helped more than 400 guests, and the list includes highly accomplished lawyers, accountants, policemen and firemen, Ivy League college students, elementary and high school teachers, college professors, Wall Street bankers, and even a few 65-year-old grandmothers. Never an easy task, especially difficult during this time of COVID, when so many people are anxious, depressed, scared for their future. But we help these people get their lives back on track, to reconnect with their families and loved ones, to gain the confidence and the skills to tackle the challenges that lie ahead. So now I just want to read one message that we got from someone that we helped, and it's a letter that was written to our staff title to our staff, and it says, "What I learned from you."
Objection, this is hearsay.
I'm not gonna get in the, trap to the last time. Rules of evidence do not generally apply, and I'm going to overrule the objection.
It is written to our staff, "What I learned from you continues to lead me towards happiness and away from the mistaken notion that drugs had been making my life bearable. Your patience, humor, experiences, collective expertise made it possible. The gift of sleep, the gift of peace, a new, much better way of dealing with the world. You made the ghosts go away. I work on my cognitive distortions and my eightfold path every day. I hope to do so every day for the rest of my life. I'm struggling to live in a wise mind, but it's a good struggle. Enjoying the combat." That's it, really. I feel good. I'm learning again. I want to live. I cannot thank you all enough. Happy New Year. At our last meeting, it was sad to hear the story about the man who was in crisis at Delaware Water Gap. But I was happy and proud that there were people there to help this man and emergency service personnel there to take this person to the hospital. It would have been better if the gentleman telling the story had not been inconvenienced for 20 minutes as he testified. But I couldn't help but think that it's very possible that a human life was saved in that short amount of time. This helped a lot of people, and the many notes, texts, emails we received from grateful guests, spouses, parents, they validate our treatment team. They validate our treatment environment, and they validate our treatment approach. They're very special, and we're very proud of that. So as we look ahead, it's clear that providing detox and residential treatment on the Water Gap Country Club property will improve on our record. Water Gap Wellness Center has provided more than 8,000 patient treatment days since it opened in March. And over that time, it has earned a reputation for providing the highest quality of care and professionalism. We're not perfect. As I testified to the committee, the state warned us last year not to have counselors go to the inn to coax guests out of bed to go to East Stroudsburg for treatment. We thought it was a well-intentioned effort to help, but after learning it was not permitted, we took immediate corrective action to stop it. It was a huge challenge to open the treatment center in East Stroudsburg last March during the pandemic, and we successfully navigated our way. The management and treatment centers and the management and treatment teams at Water Gap Wellness Center in East Stroudsburg have proven that they are seasoned and dedicated professionals. They've proven that they can deliver treatment that inspires meaningful, life-changing, life-saving improvements in people's lives. They've proven that they can do so in a nurturing and attentive way that is safe for all, including for the community. Now we hope to provide treatment on-site at the inn for our guests. Our mission to help our guests would be less complicated and more easily managed. There would be no daily transportation of guests for treatment. Residential program would be longer, 7 hours per day, 7 days per week, versus 5 hours per day, 6 days per week as it is now. So more intensive treatment day, every day. The guests are afforded very little free time. And with residential treatment, there are more structured rules in the treatment setting, including 24/7 security and surveillance staffing, therapists who would be on site every day, and support staff who are trained in de-escalation techniques. In short, if we are able to provide treatment on site to our guests, we could do more in our journey to help others. Despite the insidious combination of addiction and depression that is roiling many of our communities, we could do even more on our faithful path to help be a part of the solution, to strive to be a valued, trusted, and respected citizen in our community, and to be a partner in our community. That's all I have to say. Again, I just want to thank you, and I truly do appreciate your consideration. So, thank you. Yes.
The record should reflect that Mr. Flynn was reading off of a clear statement when he gave that statement.
Hmm.
And then if we want to examine it, we should be able to do it.
Yes, I agree. No problem.
Well, Mr. Ferrari, looking that over, if I could clarify, just for the record, Mr. Slim, who prepared the statement you were reading from?
I did.
Let Attorney Andrews go first for cross-examination.
If you want to go first, Jim, you can go first.
Mr. Slim, couple questions for you. The 400 say help that were guests at the hotel, those are people that have stayed at the hotel?
I didn't say they were guests of the hotel, I said we have over 400 clients.
Is that, well, I'm asking you, were those guests at the hotel?
All of them, no.
How many of them were guests at the hotel?
Well, I don't know, the majority of them were.
Those were people that have their getting medications at the hotel, that the nurse testified?
We don't dispense, there's people that who came to our inn, they had medication, we hold their medication in safekeeping, as I stated, and if they had medication prescribed to them during their stay at the inn, when it would come, we would confiscate that medication and hold it in an individualized basket for that client. And then when they wanted the medication, they would come to the window, ask for their medication, and we would give it to them and watch them take it. And if they ever left the inn, I'm sorry to have a long answer, but if they ever left the inn, they take their medication.
You have a permit to operate an inn, correct?
We are licensed to operate an inn, yes.
Okay. When your guests come here, they're searched, you say?
Yes.
And the contraband is confiscated?
Yes.
Is that like, they do at the Hampton Inn or the Holiday Inn?
We're not the Hampton Inn, we're a sober living environment. It has nothing to do with what happened.
You have a permit for an inn, you don't have a permit for drug and alcohol facilities, correct?
We have a separate company, which is called Water Gap Wellness Center, and I am the chief executive of that as well, and that does have an operation.
We're talking about the country club. Do they have any licensure from the
Nope,
Commonwealth of
not at all.
Drug and Alcohol Center? No. And, let's talk a bit about the medications. The medications are, ordered by nurses that are employed by one of your two companies?
As I said in my statement, medication is prescribed by a physician.
Dr. Mora?
It could be Dr. Morrow, it could be we've had, guests at the inn who've, on the other types of doctors, there's people who just like, they could have high blood pressure, they could have high cholesterol, there's all kinds of medications people take.
Does Dr. Morrow see the people that are staying at the inn, to go to the center and prescribe medications for them?
Dr. Morrow is our chief medical officer at Water Gap, Wellness Center, and he performs the job as the chief psychiatrist, and as a psychiatrist, he can prescribe medicine, yeah.
And when those prescriptions are made, what happens to them? Are they given to the guests to make a phone call to order them, or are they given to one of the employees?
As a physician, he calls the medication and he calls the prescription into the pharmacy.
And there was testimony in this case that the nurse that testified called in a prescription, is that not correct?
I don't have any knowledge whether she called in any prescription. She may have written prescription, I don't know if she called in any.
You're not denying it. She testified she called the prescription in. You're not denying that.
I don't have any knowledge about it.
Okay.
I know that nurse was fired for cause, and so I don't really believe much that she has to say.
She also testified the medications were delivered to the inn and they were delivered to personnel that were employed by the inn, particularly behavioral health technicians and nurses.
Behavioral health technician, I'm sorry.
Is that true or false?
They're delivered to an employee of the inn, any employee.
That's the employee behavioral health technician at the inn?
Behavioral health technician doesn't mean anything. It's not a defined term.
Those people at the inn?
We employ techs. Yeah, so we can call them whatever we want, behavioral health,
What would you
BHD.
call them?
I call them employees of the inn. they're drivers, they're hourly employees. They don't necessarily have a college degree. There's no qualifications for them to be that. They could be an unpaid intern. They're just employees at the inn, providing customer service to the people who stay at the inn. That's all they do.
You're saying that they're not behavioral health technicians, that's not what you're calling them.
We can call them whatever they want. The behavioral health technician name really is a legacy of our thinking that we're gonna have detox and res treatment. That's it. It means nothing about an inn employee.
Well, regardless of what it means to you, is that what you call them?
Yes, that's fine.
Also, did the inn also, or does it also employ licensed practical nurses?
The inn, no.
Or other company employ them?
We got wellness treatment center,
And do they ever go to the inn?
yeah, they'll go there on occasion.
When the medications are delivered, you said the employee accepts the medication?
Any employee can accept
So
that.
they're not delivered to the setting, they're delivered to the.
Well, usually the deliveries of the customer's prescriptions are delivered when they're not there, because they're at treatment, or at the treatment center. When the pharmacy guy comes, and we keep the medication, we put it in the basket for the client, because it's their medication.
Isn't it correct that there's no occasions where the residents accept the medications when they're delivered?
No, not true at all.
And what percentage of time does the resident?
No idea.
And then the medications are kept in two separate locked areas?
They're kept in a locked room, a locked cabinet, yes.
And when they're dispensed by an employee of the inn?
Yeah, his medication, they are, to the window, says, I'm Fred Watson, I'd like to get my medication. Fred Watson's basket is taken to him, put in front of him, his medication, he takes his medication, done taking the medication, the prescribed doses for that period. The basket has been taken back into the room, put in a locked cabinet, and the door is locked.
And is that person that dispenses the medication, is that a behavioral health technician and or an LPN?
It could be anyone. It's an inn employee.
Are there occasions when their medications distributed by the behavioral health technician or the licensed practical nurse?
Are there occasions when, say again?
Are there occasions when the medications are handed out by a behavioral health?
They're not handed out. We give.
Or a licensed practical nurse?
Like I said.
That's the person that stands behind the door and dispenses the medication.
It could be any employee of the inn.
It could be the janitor?
Yeah, it could be me. I've done it many times.
Okay. And, the employee watches the person take the medication?
Yeah.
Are there instances where there's, were there, people that were on suicide watch there, the nurse testified to?
There are people, we as a routine, because we're a sober and safe living environment, we check on people all the time. We have 1 hour bed checks all the time, right? And so it's just part of, a wraparound supportive environment that we try to create at the end.
So you're not answering my question. Are there occasions where patients that are staying there have been on suicide watch?
We don't use that term. We would say that there's occasions where people are distraught and depressed, that we should keep an eye on them, and we try to do that.
People that threaten to harm themselves? All in that category?
There are people who do self-harm. Yeah, that doesn't make them bad people. I think it's no mystery that we're trying to help people who are suffering from depression. And some of those people stay at our inn. We try to do whatever we can to make sure that they're happy and they're safe and they're taken care of.
Are there instances where patients have attempted to commit suicide?
No.
Are there instances where people have left the hotel and you've had to retrieve them?
People are voluntarily able to leave the hotel. They're not criminals, right? They're protected, their civil rights. It's the first thing when we did our inspection, our 1 year inspection. The first thing that the Drug and Alcohol Programs inspector says, you have to make sure that you protect the civil rights of the clients that you treat. Now that relates to Warrior Wellness Center, But, you know, we follow that rule in everything that we do.
In your statement, you alerted to the incident that, the former mayor of Delaware Water Gap testified to. Were you aware of that incident?
No.
What percentage of the medications are ordered by Dr. Morrow that are delivered to the end?
No idea.
I have nothing else.
I just have a few follow-up. Sir, how often, you're licensed as an inn, correct, at the country club facility?
Correct.
And that's similar to a hotel, correct?
Yeah, I've seen the definition of the two. They seem pretty similar to me, yes.
Have you stayed at the Holiday Inn, other such hotels?
Have I ever stayed at a Holiday Inn? Yes, I have stayed at a Holiday Inn before.
Have you stayed at other hotels?
I have.
Isn't it true, sir, they don't have bed checks?
I've never been in a hotel that has a bed check.
And isn't it true, sir, that those hotels don't search your belongings before you register or go to your room?
You know, that's not true, actually. It hasn't been, there's a lot of wellness hotels now.
I didn't ask you about wellness hotels, I said a hotel, sir.
Well, wellness hotel is the same thing. There's a hotel that's focused on creating a clean environment, a pure environment, a wellness environment.
Would you agree with me, sir, that you are not licensed as a wellness environment, you're licensed as an inn?
No license for a wellness environment, Marshall. I can have an inn that says no alcohol. I do. We don't have an alcohol license anymore. Previously,
I just asked you, sir, my question to you was, and I'd like a simple yes or no answer. Have you ever stayed at an inn or a hotel where you were searched before you entered the hotel or before you got to your room? Yes or no?
Can the witness be allowed to answer his question before he's interrupted by Mr. Anders?
Marshall, Mr. Anders, so we're clear we don't get into wellness hotel, whatever. Why don't you say, Holiday Inn, Best Western, something that,
I did. I said the hotels were, all right. Have you ever stayed at a Best Western or Holiday Inn where you were searched before you went to your room?
no.
And isn't it true, sir, that the medications that are prescribed to people staying at the inn are, in fact, 95% of those medications are prescribed by Dr. Morrow?
I already was asked that question. I don't know the percentage. I was already asked that by lawyer Ferrari.
Are there any other doctors in the Stroudsburg-Monroe County area who prescribe drugs to individuals staying at the country club facility?
I believe that the answer is yes to that.
Who are they?
I don't know their names, but I know that there have been instances where medications have been prescribed to people who happen to also be guests at our inn.
And were they prescribed for addiction-related situations?
I don't know what they were prescribed for, but I think they were, I don't know. I don't have that direct knowledge.
Who wrote the letter that you read from?
I did.
No, not the statement, sir.
Actually, let me if I give a more fulsome answer. I have lived, eaten, and breathed this facility, okay? And
That's not my question, sir.
Center, March 15th. So I'm trying to give you credibility.
I don't need
everything
an
about
answer.
what we've done, everybody we've treated. I know every issue that's happened and or purported to happen, and I know when people are trying to twist the truth. Okay.
Well, sir, excuse me, my question to you was, who wrote the letter that you read from? You said you received the letter. You wrote the letter you said was written by a patient?
The letter from the patient. No, I can't divulge that. It's a HIPAA. It's confidential.
So it was all right for you to read the letter, and that's not a HIPAA violation, but to disclose the person's name would be a HIPAA violation.
Yes, because I didn't use his name. Absolutely.
Did you ask him for permission to read that letter? Him or her?
It's a him.
Can I ask something? What is the relevance to this procedure?
relatives of which.
It's cross-examination.
This letter, you know, can we proceed to something more, germane?
I would, from what I've heard, say that, it's trying to establish whether this was in fact an inn or, some other facility, but as far as I'm concerned, we've gone over that and, I think we've all made our own conclusions about that.
I have nothing further.
I have a few, and I'll try not to try the board's patience. Reading from your statement that you wrote, and you're welcome to look at it if you want to verify and read it accurately. This is the safeguarding medication portion. When it is time for the guest to access their medicine, they go to a closed window, unquote, where a Water Gap wellness employee retrieves the basket, watches the guest take the prescribed dosage, and then returns the basket to the locked cabinet in the locked room. And I think you pretty much read that verbatim. Would you agree? That's true. Couple dumb questions. Sure. And I'm not trying to trick you. When you say Water Gap wellness employee, I assume you're talking about the inn and the treatment facility is Water Gap Wellness Center? You say a Water Gap Wellness employee retrieves a basket,
It's an employee of the inn.
wanted to be sure. Right. And that person watches the guest take the prescribed dosage. Does that assume that the, employee has control of the dosage that is taken?
No, but if a person took too much of their dose, or they didn't take their medication, then as part of our policy, just like it's just part of our rules, that you're supposed to take your medication, or you're supposed to follow the rules. So not taking your medication is grounds for dismissal from the inn.
Okay. And presumably deciding to take 3 pills would be grounds for dismissal from the inn.
Yes.
Is the employee instructed to make sure the guest doesn't take 3 pills?
No, there's nothing we can do because it's the client's medication. So we can't touch them, we can't restrain them. They're a guest at the inn, okay? So they have control over the medication. They could go to the window and say, give me the basket of medication, I'm leaving, okay? And they could do that. If they came to the inn, many times they had medication. They may get prescribed medication when they're at the inn. When they leave the inn, it's their possession, and they take it with them.
But you monitor how much they take or whether they don't take it. And if either of those 2 events happen, you're saying that they're asked to leave the inn.
They could be, yes.
Have you had people that you required to leave the inn because they either didn't show up to take their medication at the window, or perhaps less common, they decided to take a handful of their medication all at once?
We had people, I don't know of any instances where anyone took, a handful of medication.
So let's go back to the first case, people that, human nature being what it is, decided not to come to the window for their morning medication.
What would we do?
Have you, in fact, asked people to leave the inn?
There are people who've, I think there's probably been a couple of occasions where a person refuses, doesn't want to take their meds. And so we say, if you don't want to follow the rules of the inn, then we prefer you not to be here.
So it's fair to say you monitor the medication?
Now, we monitor the behavior of the guests of the inn.
You're taking the medication?
In doing anything.
Okay. The nurse testified, and I presume you heard it, that there were some people that needed injections, the prescription.
Yeah, that was patently false, what she said. There's never been a Vivitrol shot given at the inn, period.
Has there been any kind of shot?
No, it's not.
No insulin?
Zero. It was a total lie that she said.
Okay. Let me understand a little bit more about the, you pay hotel tax when someone checks in, or they charge hotel tax?
Pay hotel tax quarterly.
Okay.
Maybe it's monthly now. I think they changed it. It might have been 7 years with the quarter. I know it's more frequently now.
So the residential component, is taxed under the hotel tax, law, is what you're testifying.
residential component, you mean when people stay at the inn, the fees that they?
That's a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
You're correct.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there other fees that are charged, fees for administering medication that are charged at the inn? Are the stays at the inn, the residential stays, ever billed to a third party such as an insurance company?
Never.
So this is all private pay?
People would give us credit cards to pay for the inn, but yes, they pay. It's we're in the inn. Okay.
Yeah. Are any of the people who are your guests at the inn? Well, let me back up. Water Gap Wellness, does Water Gap Wellness solely treat substance abuse, or do you also treat people with mental health issues?
The two are not really, necessarily, separate. As we've testified, and as part of the long record from the past 2 years of these hearings, many times, what we say is we treat the person, we don't treat the symptoms. And so, usually there's an underlying medical condition that contributes to a person's, addiction. And so we try to treat both.
What you're saying is people with substance abuse issues often have mental health issues.
I did say that.
But that wasn't quite my question, maybe I didn't express it well enough. Do you treat people who present with no substance abuse issues, no alcohol abuse issues, no drug abuse issues, but have mental health issues? And are being treated for the mental health issues?
If a person didn't have any issues and they wanted to be a cash pay, because certainly, into our treatment center, wanted to avail themselves of the services that are provided, the counseling service that are provided in our program, then anyone could attend. You may find benefit to come to our Water Gap Wellness Treatment Center and have 6 hours a day or 5 hours a day of treatment. And as long as you pay the fee, it's not going through insurance. The whole idea of a diagnosis, that's more related to insurance, okay? If there's no diagnosis, then insurance company is not going to pay. And so instead, those people will cash pay. And we do have people who cash pay because, definitely in this time of COVID, there's times when people just say, I don't like the way I'm feeling, I don't like the way I'm getting along with my husband or my wife or my parents or what have you. I need to reset myself. And we absolutely have people and help people like that as well.
But you are licensed not only, if I remember correctly, by DDAP, but also by the NHMR section of the Department of Health and, the Department of Human Relations, correct?
Before you answer, can I just get a clarification? You said when you're talking about the facility on Independence Road in East Stroudsburg?
Right. Well, I'm talking about both, since he's the president of both, and he's testified at length how the two interrelate. And that would then lead me to circle back to the
I just want the record to be clear as to what you're doing is, you're asking questions about current treatment, which facility you're talking about. That's the distinction I'm trying to make on the record.
Okay. Let me then be specific, and I'll circle back, I hope, to the Water Gap Wellness Center. The Water Gap Treatment Center, you are licensed also by Human Services, through their NHMR division of finance, using the right initials. So am I correct?
I don't know the initials, to be honest, but we're honest, we're licensed by the Department of Human Services.
As well as the DEA, drug and alcohol. Right. And Human Services licenses you for mental health treatment, not for drug and alcohol treatment. That's the division. It does. Okay. Now, so are there people, first question, being treated and under the inspection of Human Services for mental health issues without being treated for DDAP issues under the license supervision of the state for drug and alcohol?
Well, as I said in my statement, as we testified to, I think as well, Water Gap Wellness Center is is dually licensed. It's one of the few places in the Northeast that's dually licensed. And yes, we do, on occasion, treat people who do not have, a substance diagnosis. Doesn't mean they don't abuse alcohol. Some people in this room may have abusing alcohol, but they don't have that diagnosis. And so those people might have a more acute mental health issue that is a diagnosis, and then we can treat them. But that's sort of the key. Having a dual licensure, there's a lot of people that can't afford treatment unless insurance pays for it, okay? And so if you're just drinking twice a week, okay, or 3 times a week, the insurance company may not authorize that at all, okay? But if you have some more acute mental health issue, then your insurance company may authorize you to get treated for that. And ultimately, if we're treating the mental health condition, I think it would help you with your drinking problem.
And your aspiration, if I understand it correctly, throughout this 2-year process, is to be able to provide the treatment you're providing at Water Gap Wellness Center in East Stroudsburg at the Water Gap Wellness location here in Smithfield County.
True.
And that would include treating those people who are now treated in East Stroudsburg here.
No, we're going to maintain our outpatient center at East Stroudsburg.
I thought I heard you say that the people living in the inn would no longer be traveling to East Stroudsburg because they'd be receiving their treatment at the inn.
Right, so what would happen is the inn would no longer be an inn. It would be a residential treatment center.
Right.
And so the people who are wanting residential treatment, would be at the treatment center. But there are so many people who need help, and they just would not, come and stay at the inn. There's other places they could stay at the Stroud Hotel. There's plenty of places they could stay.
The people would include people being treated for mental health issues, people being treated for substance abuse issues, and some who are being treated for both.
Right now, all we really envision in terms of the residential treatment would be, we're going to be applying for our residential drug treatment license, from the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs and our detox license at this point.
So are you saying on the record that you would not be applying for licensure by,
We want to be dually licensed because we're looking to help people, okay? They're one and the same, as I said, okay? The fact that an insurance company wants to authorize or doesn't want to authorize doesn't obviate the fact that they have a mental health issue that can be treated, okay? So, if what we do, we feel to be overqualified is a good thing. To be able to treat all aspects of the person is a good thing. We don't cede what we're going to treat of the person based on what some insurance company arbitrarily says they're going to cover. So it's not going to do that.
I hear you saying you would be seeking to either transfer or expand your current license from Human Services for mental health treatment.
Clarify, there is no current license. You know what, I think you made your point, Peter. Can we move on?
I'm trying to understand what he's going to do, and
I think it's clear that he's going to do mental health treatment alone, drug, alcohol alone, or a combination at the end if it's permitted.
If that's permitted, then if that's clear, then I think
That's clear to me. It may not be clear to him, but it's clear to me.
I think it's extremely relevant, and we'll deal with that in closing. I have no further questions for Mr. Schmidt.
I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
All right.
Ron, could I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
Okay. It should be quick. So if you're granted full conditional approval, would a wellness center employee then disperse the medication?
But there's a whole different set of requirements. So there was a requirement for nursing in residential, 24/7, you have to have nurses. Okay? So, so that's what you would do. You then are actually, you're administering meds. It's a different word, it's a defined term,
Okay. My second question, this is not necessarily relevant to the medication, but do you know if the hotel tax is still paid, if you were to convert, to the residential facility, or is that not relevant at that point?
I don't think that you pay a hotel tax at that point.
I don't have anything else.
Okay, so you may take your seat, Mr. Flynn.
Thanks, guys.
All right, gentlemen.
Mr. Ferrari, I mentioned that I had some questions. It's one of your witnesses. Do you want me to, ask you about that now, or would you rather do so?
You want to ask me the questions? Or the-
Well, can I speak directly to her? I would do that if I can.
That's,
Diane Delacano.
That's up to the board if you'd like to do that, absolutely.
Board? All right.
I would have, I suppose I have no objection to, if you're gonna ask her a question.
Brian, which witness?
Yeah, Diane Delacano. I think she's on here, isn't she?
She's on this.
Diane?
I am, I'm here.
Hi. I just had a few quick questions for you.
It should be noted, she's still under oath. She was placed under oath the last time.
Right. You mentioned that, the signs, or some signs around the drug lock room were taken down because there was going to be an inspection. Do you have any idea what that inspection was? I'm wondering if it might have been from our zoning officer, which was about May.
I do not know who was supposed to inspect it.
All right. And you mentioned there were transfers that were taken in the inn, and I just want to make sure I got it correctly. There were people that were paranoid schizophrenics and bipolar, right? And some of them had addiction problems, some of them didn't. Am I correct on that or not?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. Have you ever worked in another facility like this?
No.
And can you tell me something more about the security that was in place? A little vague on that.
There was just a gate
I'm sorry?
and
What?
some cameras.
Cameras? Who looked at the cameras?
The staff.
So there was somebody that was always monitoring the cameras?
Yes.
What about door alarms? What about bed checks? Anything like that?
There were bed checks, and I didn't hear what else you said about alarms.
I said, were there alarms, like door alarms and things like that, or and bed checks? What else went on there?
I don't know if there might have been alarms on the exit doors on the sides of the inn. I'm not really positive about that. But the bed checks went on throughout the night when the clients were done with treatment and they would come back.
What time did they come back?
Around 5.
Okay. You don't have to answer this, but I'm just curious. You didn't mention the reasons you left. You said that it was by mutual consent between you and Joe Schlimm. Do you want to say anything more about why you left?
As per conversation we had, I was being terminated, but I was also putting my resignation together. I already had another job lined up before I even went into the office that day. I was not planning on staying.
Can you tell me why you left then? You were seeking other employment. What was the problem?
It was completely unorganized, and I felt like my nursing license was in jeopardy, giving out medications at what was supposedly an inn, and not a drug and alcohol treatment center.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, now, based upon those questions, does council have any questions?
Just briefly, if you want. Ms. Delacano, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Attorney Wolf, representing the applicant. In conjunction with your termination, which you testified to, did you apply for unemployment?
I did, and it would only been for 2 weeks, but I didn't get unemployment.
When you indicated it was mutual and you had something else lined up, that was not accurate then, correct?
I did have something lined up, yes.
No further questions.
Okay.
I just got one, should I have one or two?
Sure, go ahead.
Nurse Delacano, it's Jim Ferrari. You testified that there were bed checks,
Yes.
and who performed the bed checks?
The behavioral health technicians, the staff.
And the medications that were handed out, were they pre-dosed?
No. Okay, they came, the way they were ordered in blister packs, like they do in a nursing home or a nursing facility. So that one pill can be popped out at a time for the correct dosage for the client.
And who would do that?
The nurses or the behavioral health technicians.
Mr. Schlim was asked whether he knew the percentage of the medications that were prescribed by Dr. Morrow, and he said that he didn't know. Do you know, or can you estimate what the percentage was?
100% of the medications were ordered by Dr. Morrow.
And when the medications were delivered, were they always delivered to staff at the inn?
Somebody had a sign for them, yes.
Would you know any cases where they were delivered to the people staying at the inn?
Absolutely never.
Mr. Schlim also denied that Vivitrol was ever administered at the inn, but I thought he testified that it was and it was injected. Is that correct?
It was injected. It was injected at the inn at least 3 times that I know about when I was there.
Okay.
One more question. Were there roll calls?
I don't know anything about a roll call. Oh, maybe in the morning to get them in the vans.
That's it, okay, thank you.
And the medication was rolled out 3 times a day?
Yes, 3 times a day. Morning, afternoon when they came back for lunch, and actually it was 4 times a day. There were dinner time and then there were bedtime medications. And also there were vital signs that went along with that. So that to me as a nurse is medical treatment.
And when were the vital signs taken?
Usually at dinner time. That's when Dr. Morrow wanted them done.
And would they be recorded somewhere?
They would have been recorded right on the medication record with medication administration.
Just so we're clear, when you say vital signs, you mean blood pressure?
Blood pressure, heart rate, yes.
Okay. Mr. Schlim also testified just today, this is the first time I heard this, that the guests were actually, or patients, whatever you want to call them, they were actually searched when they came into the hotel. You know anything about that?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Did you ever witness that being done?
Yes.
What exactly happened?
They would stand behind a screen and remove all their clothing except for underwear, shoes, socks, and I did it myself. Searched even we were trained how to search all of their clothing, including like the hems of the pants and the hats and socks, inside the shoes, inside the elastic waistband of underwear or women's bras.
And you did that yourself?
Yes, I did.
I have no further questions. Thank you. No
I think, this is Marshall Anders, I think I have 1 or 2. Since I'm unclear on this, ma'am, maybe you can tell me, what is a behavioral health technician?
It's like, I could compare it to like in a hospital, a CNA that would be an aide that would take care of, a patient when the nurse is not available to do things like take them to the bathroom. Here, the behavioral health technicians, they assisted the clients, gathered them up to go into the vans, gathered them up to come back from the vans, took them out for smoke breaks, that sort of thing. And they also checked them. They did their bed checks at night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, are we through? All right, hearing no one say we're not through, we're through. So, now the board is at a point to determine, do you want to close the record, the hearing record? If so, the 45 days for me to write a decision begins to run. We don't have to make a decision tonight. You can consider what was said.
I have some questions for Mr. Wolf.
Mr. Wolf. Oh, okay.
Do you forget?
No, I did for a moment. I was thinking of Mark Wolf from last night's meeting.
Oh, Mark was here?
No, he was Zoomed.
Mr. Wolf, I'm speaking for myself here, but after listening to everything we've talked about, and also reading the message of our purpose that was on the website of the Wellness Center, I'd like to ask a few questions and make a few comments here. First, I will say that I'm talking about the hotel, not about the treatment center. The treatment center has a place where we've never had any complaint, and we assume it's running very well. And I would also tell you, if you don't know, I don't know, that the treatment center now is in our economic development zone, where drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers are permitted by right. When you applied originally with your client for the Delaware Water Gap location, we didn't have that in any of our zones. It wasn't defined. And when you applied for the, what did we do last summer?
Curative amendment.
Curative amendment, again, it had not been passed, but it is in effect now. So we're not speaking about that. And talking about the Water Gap Inn, I'll say parenthetically, I have been to the Hampton Inn, I have been to the Fairfield Inn, and both of them offered me free breakfast, but no one offered me a cup of medication with breakfast. And my feeling is, let's cut to what this really is. This is not an inn. It never was. I'm dismayed by that. But under our definition and our zoning laws of what an inn is not an inn. It's doing far more than providing lodging and meals. And I'm not concerned about that now. I think what I am concerned about and what I'm really talking towards is this last 10 months, whatever it's been, has really been a shakedown cruise towards the approval of this, of the conditional use for the Wellness Center. And Mr. Slim said that in his statement that it has had sound management. I'm not sure about that. First of all, from what we heard from Ms. Delicano, there's certain questions. And I think this facility was in taking in people and in, let's say, sheltering them, let's say, had great responsibilities, not only because it was treating people with drug and alcohol problems, but it was treating people with paranoid schizophrenia and bipolar problems. And what I'm curious about is why the security and surveillance and oversight was not in line with what a real treatment facility would be, since that was what it was heading towards. And I think sound management would have made sure, or insisting upon that. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Mr. Slim testified that the Hillside Treatment Center on Prutchie Road, which is run by Pyramid Health, was an example of what wellness center would be or should be. And that was approved in 2012 by Middle Smithfield Township. And it was a contentious hearing, very much like this has been. But within the hearing, Pyramid, and these were not conditions that were put on Pyramid, this was part of what Pyramid's policy was, were hourly roll calls, nighttime bed checks, and patient counts every 15 minutes, and that's in accordance with Pennsylvania state licensing regulations. Supervision while on outside grounds engaging in recreation, audible door alarms and surveillance monitors on exit doors and in larger areas such as lobbies, cafeterias, and lounges. In the event a patient desires to discontinue treatment, Pyramid employs a 48-hour procedure designed to dissuade a patient from leaving. Pyramid provides transportation from the treatment center, and if the patient refuses transportation, the police are notified. That's just part of their policy. Then we go back to 3 of these, let's say, call them straying incidents, all right? One was on Walter Conway's property, where he was led to believe that somebody had injured themselves or stabbed themselves. And the attendant who was chasing this person or following them, who finally took him into an ambulance, said that she was a friend and that she was from East Stroudsburg University. He later found out the patient, this was a guest at the treatment center. Why would she be covering that up? That was in the middle of the afternoon. Then Wesley Campbell told us that at 7 o'clock at night, he was walking his dog and heard somebody screaming from the inn at I wanted to leave. I needed to get out of there. They were going to kill somebody tonight or something like that. That went on for 20 minutes. Where was the staff? Then Terry Fagan wrote to the supervisors. This was not in testimony. On January 9th, he was walking down Mountain Road, and outside the gate near the Campbell's property, there was a gentleman on a cell phone saying, "We were sitting at a table and they told me I was going to die if I didn't straighten up." Excuse me, but that does not sound like a statement of a through hiker on the Appalachian Trail. Another thing Mr. Fagan said in the letter is that residents have the right to enjoy their peace, privacy, and happiness, especially on their property. I think this township agrees with that. In fact, 3 years ago, we passed a law outlawing short-term rentals and like Airbnb for that very reason, to ensure that people had the right to privacy and happiness on their own property, and they were not subject to strangers in the neighborhood that they didn't know and who were doing things that were in some way disturbing to them. So what we're dealing with here, I think, is problems with the neighborhood and questions of how this place was managed inside. And I don't know the answers to any of these, but when Mr. Slim talked about sound management, I question that. And I question, as I say, if this is a shakedown cruise, and in 10 months we've had these kinds of problems, I don't know what we're facing. But I can tell you this, I've talked to the Middle Smithfield supervisors about the Pyramid property since 2012, when they passed I guess it would be, I think it was R1 also, so it would be conditional use. They're only aware of one incident, and the one incident was somebody went up to a door of a nearby neighbor, asked to use the phone, the neighbor said no, and the person went away. That's it, in 8 years. And look at what we've had here in a few months. Anyway, I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but that's
Let me just,
I don't mean to cut you off, but we haven't got this. To make this part of your closing argument, then.
I can certainly do that.
Yeah, why don't you do that? This way then we keep it moving.
I would just note that, Mr. Little, document that we don't have, but apparently there was a Facebook, I don't know if it was a Facebook posting or something.
This was on the wellness, Water Gap Wellness, website, January 25th.
Is that the same thing that he read, or that's just like what he read, or something different?
That's different.
It's different.
letter. Oh, okay, got it. I thought you said something about this.
No, this is, I printed that for Robert, because I saw it, because it was sponsored, like an advertisement on Facebook, so that's where I found the letter, on the website.
So where's the Fagan letter, or Fagan email that Robert is
The Fagan letter was sent to the 3 supervisors. He wasn't cross-examined or wasn't asked about it when he was talking about traffic on Mountain Road.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Barrett, I have just one question. Robert, I don't want to interrupt, that's for sure. Is a woman there who testified, are you still with us, ma'am?
Yes, I am.
Do you have anything to say or anything you would like to address about being called a liar by Mr. Schlimm this afternoon?
Yes, I guess that works both ways, because this is the second time I've witnessed Joe Schlimm under oath doing nothing but lying, and that's actually what made me contact the attorney to begin with, because he said there was no medical treatment being done at the inn. All of his statements were false. I have nothing against him. There were no bad feelings when I departed there, but I've never been involved with an organization that was so mismanaged. And it's a shame, because it's a beautiful facility and I do believe in treatment and rehab. There's a lot of addiction in my family, but when I got involved with people who were just outright lying and it was just so much secrecy going on. And I was part of the management team, but there was so much secrecy going on. Okay. That I just felt kind of betrayed. I don't have any more to say, but I mean, I know, of course he's going to call me a liar because he doesn't want to hear anything that I have to say. He doesn't like the truth, apparently.
Understood. And again, we have your testimony and Mr. Schlimm's testimony, and it totally contradicts each other. So maybe there's something that I don't know. This should be looked at a little bit more. I'm really thinking that somebody's lying. It's as simple as that. It's night and day.
I could tell you that there were other nurses that were hired and worked alongside of me. You know.
Well, and that's all. I'm not questioning your integrity whatsoever, but I appreciate your giving us your feedback on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you need me anymore?
But personally, no, I do not.
I do not either. Counsel?
No.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're back to you, Andy, for Mr. Wolf, for your closing arguments, and then we can have these gentlemen also close this matter. So you're on.
Thank you, and I'll try and be brief. I know Mr. Schlimm gave a statement, some of which I was going to talk about, so I'll try not to be repetitive. I want to address Supervisor Levenheim's comments, I think, first, because I think they're fair questions. The situation that we have here is, since March of 2020, is effectively a bifurcation of what was initially conceptualized by Mr. Schlimm when we started this whole proceeding. If you remember back to what he talked about, because of the length of these proceedings and the many objections that have come from the residents, this is going to take a long time. What we've ended up in, it's got a division of the residential component and the treatment component. That was not what was intended. And it's led to an imperfect situation. And the irony is, because of how these proceedings have happened, you have individuals being housed at the inn and treated at a separate facility. And that has led to a far from ideal situation. Why is that far from ideal? Because the types of safeguards that Mr. Schlim had testified to initially.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm just gonna go to the restroom.
Initially during his presentation to the community and throughout these proceedings, have been frustrated in the sense that he cannot open a facility there. He cannot operate it as a residential treatment facility. He's put in a position of being criticized for anything there that looks unlike a Holiday Inn, to use Mr. Anders' example, and then similarly criticized for not having safeguards in place. By his own testimony, operating as trying to operate a sober environment there. It is not a treatment center because it's not licensed to be that. So the security features, the monitoring, the medical staffing, all of that he testified to and presented to the township and the supervisors is not currently in place. The question is, why isn't it in place? Because it's not a licensed treatment facility. It's not a residential treatment facility. We used the example of Pyramid in Middle Smithfield Township. I don't know how they started, but I'm assuming that they started up right as a fully licensed residential facility, having all those safeguards in place right out of the box. Again, that's not what we had here. Bear with me 1 second. The purpose of these proceedings has been to evaluate a conditional use. In response to the Curative Amendment, a conditional use has been added for this type of treatment facility in the R1 zone. There were a couple of conditions that had to be met. It has to be at least 25 acres. I believe Lovenheim had put a condition on 60 maximum beds. So really the question now, we meet the acreage size, we meet the maximum occupancy requirement. But the issue is, at this point is, can a facility like this be operated such that it will not be detrimental to the health and welfare of the community? And what we have been hearing from the objectors have been examples of activities that have happened there over a period of about 10 months or so, not while it's a residential treatment facility, but while it's an inn. And those are the objections that I have made throughout this proceeding. The testimony is not relevant to how it's operated as an inn. Lovenheim is concerned about the management. It's not being managed as a residential treatment facility currently, because it's not that. I think the commitment that the applicant has demonstrated in making in opening the treatment facility in East Stroudsburg, running an excellent facility there, in making the physical improvements to the inn in the hopes of having a treatment facility there, are really more demonstrative of what the applicant is intending. Having all these complaints at the forefront, that has really been what's been driving the bus of all these hearings. Not really the conditional use issues. It's been what has happened there while it's an inn. We don't like what's happened there while it's an inn. I would submit that with respect to the residents' complaints, I think my client could achieve lasting peace while solving cancer and still not please the residents. They don't want this facility there. It's clear. There's black and white. They don't want the facility there. We understand it. We get that. That's not the inquiry. The inquiry is, can the facility be in that location and managed and run without being jeopardizing the health, safety, and welfare of the community. That's the general condition use standard. My client has not really had the opportunity to demonstrate that because it's an inn. It is not a treatment facility. You can't have a lockdown. That would be tantamount to a prison. If he had a locked down facility there, he's essentially running a prison, sort of a detention facility. That's not permitted, to my knowledge, under your zoning. It's allowed to run an inn there. And again, the situation we've had over the last 10 months has been an example of having a treatment facility over here in Independence Road and having a housing facility here rather than having those facilities combined. It's created additional traffic concerns and having these vans going back and forth. All of that would not be taking place actually a licensed facility, residential licensed treatment facility on the property. In 1 second, I don't want to throw it on here, but Mr. Levin, had a question about the number of number of incidents over a short period of time. There's been a lot of testimony as things that have happened in Delaware Water Gap. The assumption, of course, is all of that is generated as a result of my client running an inn on the property. And we don't know if some, all, or none of those incidents are truly as a result of that. Those incidents, assuming that they did happen, would not be taking place if the security features were in place. Again, there's going to be security there all the time, locked doors, alarms. Individuals are not going to be allowed to wander around the property at any of these types of treatment facilities. Again, are largely located on these types of properties in settings where there's a large area that can be set back from other uses. This facility would allow that. It has a limited access, which I think is a good thing. That's been talked about as a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. And it's essentially one point of access in, which allows for security to be monitored more easily. The comings and goings of vehicles. That's all a component of what Mr. Slim has talked about, right out of the box. I don't want to rehash all of that, but I would ask that you look back at what was presented to you initially. None of that has changed. That's what is still proposed for this facility. This is a conditional use. The trial period is not the period from March of 2020 until the present. The trial period is once this facility is open. If it turns out to be a facility that is unmanageable, the township has vehicles to deal with that. But I would suggest that my client be given a chance to actually operate what he has proposed to operate there, which is a residential treatment.
Members of the board and Mr. Chairman, it's our very strong position in this case that this conditional use should be denied. And before we get into the issue of conditions, what I would suggest is that the board take a vote on that, whether it would be granted or denied. And if you deny it, then you don't have to get into the conditions. If it's granted, then I can talk to you about conditions. So I don't know, Ron, is that an acceptable?
I would tell you that I'm not crazy about that because a simple why it's being denied or why it's being granted doesn't give me enough information to be able to write a legitimate or not legitimate, to write a well-informed decision with respect to this matter. I was going to tell the board my position, it's not meant to steal your thunder, but that if they want to close the hearing today, that they now think about what's been said, come back within maybe 10 days, a week to 10 days, and make their yes or no decision with or without conditions, and then I still have time to write the opinion. So now whether they would listen to me to do that, I don't know, but that was what my hope was.
I have a list of conditions here that I can give. Our position, you should never even get to that because you don't think it needs to be approved. I'll make that argument now. If we're going to follow that procedure, it'd be helpful for me to know that now because I won't go into all the conditions.
And then let's do this because I'm not sure where they are, and I haven't talked to the board about this matter. And as you know, they can make decisions in these matters like zoning boards do in special exception or variances in private. They don't have to discuss their deliberation. So I would rather have you make the argument that you believe it's not permitted there, and then go to your conditions. It may take a little longer, but at least then the board has all of the information it needs to make a decision.
I think before that, I'd like to hear from the chairman on what he wants to do.
Okay.
I mean, I would defer in this case to our solicitor. I'd like to hear the case for both, as I stated at our last meeting, whether or not we intend to grant conditional use it's helpful to have those, conditions, and then also to know whether or not the applicant would supply their own or, defer to those presented, by others. So I'd like to hear both sides.
May I then submit these with the conditions now?
Now, Coach Dow had a list of conditions. Are they the same or is this different? Or in addition to, or supplementing, or whatever?
Well, Coach Dow is not in our, not in, there are a lot of them are just listed, or,
I mean, they may cover the same area, and I understand.
Same area, if the coach has conditions he wants to advise the board of, we certainly can do that.
And just for the record, Mr. Farrar, I did just give you a list of conditions. I have not seen these yet or reviewed these yet, so. I have the information from the planning commission, the recommendations from the planning commission, the two separate meetings where it reviewed this matter, but I have not had a chance to review.
Neither has the board, so we're all on the same footing, so.
We didn't submit them earlier because we didn't know what was gonna happen tonight in terms of whether there would be additional testimony, whether we were gonna go right into argument. I probably would amend them further if I had the chance, since we asked them on submitting them now.
Using the rest. We'll be back in a moment, so if you don't mind.
We're gonna make these part of the record, Donna, so you can have something to refer to rather than be guessing. It's up to you.
I won't be guessing, but anything,
Well, you know what I mean.
everything is helpful. Yeah.
All right, well, let's
Yeah.
we'll make it part of, objector or protestant's argument one.
Okay.
It's not really evidence, it's more for the argument, so. Have another copy there, Tim, to give to Donna, if not, I'll give her my copy. We'll take Mr. Tressler's. Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And a Herculean effort, and this hearing has been a lot of information, it's got a long and twisted path. But I think now that we're at this point, I think it's clear to me that this conditional use should be denied. And I think that Supervisor Lovenheim, with his statements at the end, kind of, hit the nail on the head. This facility is, to say this facility is an inn, or has been operated as an inn, really is, you have to say, and this is a drug and alcohol treatment facility. It's being operated by the owner, albeit in conjunction with another facility. But what goes on there is certainly not the same as what goes on at a quote-unquote inn. And with a conditional use, under your ordinance, a conditional use empowers you to place reasonable safeguards and conditions on the property. And this applicant is asking you to trust him to follow those conditions. He clearly has not been honest with you at any point in these proceedings as to what really is going on there. And the only reason he got up there today and testified was because the nurse pulled the sheet off of what he was trying to hide from everybody and confirmed what we've been arguing all along, and that is this place is being operated as a drug and alcohol facility and certainly not as an inn. And you just don't have her testimony. You also have the Department of Drug and Alcohol went up there and did an inspection and issued a warning to him because he doesn't have a license to do this at the inn, that they were having counseling there. So I think that warning from the drug and alcohol people, when you put that together with the nurse, what you said, and when you put that together with the incidents that Mr. Lovenheim testified to, or indicated that were testified to by the residents, this place is not being operated as just an inn, it's a drug and alcohol facility. And this applicant has not been honest with you about that, and if you're looking for this applicant to follow conditions that you're gonna put on him, I mean, how are you going to be assured that he's going to follow these conditions when he hasn't been truthful at any point in these proceedings? We have the transcripts here, and I hope you look at them before you make a decision. But if you look at the testimony that Mr. Schlim gave earlier in August, he was totally at variance with what he's saying now. In August, he's saying that, you know, drugs are delivered to people at the inn. They don't have anything to do with the medication. And in the nurse's testimony and his testimony here tonight, we find out that the medications are being prescribed by their doctor, they're being ordered by his staff, they're being delivered to his staff, they're being held by his staff, and they're being doled out by his staff in appropriate doses, and that the employees are not only handing the medications out, they're watching people to make sure that they properly take them. This is a medical facility. This is not a hotel. And this guy has not been honest with you about that. So if you're looking at him to follow conditions, you have no indicia of reliability there for him to follow any conditions. Additionally, one of the things you look at in the conditional use is the adverse effect it has in the surrounding area and whether it should be permitted or not permitted based upon the extent of the adverse effect. And here you have testimony Mr. Lovenheim alluded to. There's numerous incidents where these people have caused disruption to the residential community that surrounds the neighborhood. And that's another reason why this really should not be permitted. It just should be denied. It doesn't belong there. The applicant doesn't have any credibility with you that he's going to properly manage the place or follow the conditions. So I think that I would urge the board to deny the conditional use application. If you want to get into the list of conditions, we've provided to you a list of 30 conditions. I don't know if you want me to go over those item by item or you want to read them. I'll leave that up to the board. But they're all conditions that we believe are appropriate based upon the testimony in the case. If you decide to grant the conditional use, we would ask you to look at those before you would grant a conditional use and impose any conditions. Had a lot of conditions that they wanted to impose on it. So I think for you to really do that, I think you should follow the solicitor's advice, come back and discuss that after you've had the time to digest them. Thank you. Thank you.
If I may.
Please proceed. Go ahead, Marshall. Mr. Andrews, go ahead.
As some of you or most of you are aware, throughout my career, I have represented murderers, mobsters, drug dealers, burglars, thugs, and other criminals. And all the proceedings in representing those people, I have never heard such disingenuous testimony as Mr. Schlim has put before this board and expects this board to accept as truthful. His statement tonight was nothing more than a self-serving attempt to justify something that he knows was going on but didn't want to admit. He said he called the nurse a liar. Well, I would think if you look at the transcript and the contradictions in testimony of Mr. Schlim, it's clear who the liar is. It's also disingenuous for the board to believe that because this was not a residential treatment facility, that things will change, such as security and things of other nature, because it becomes one. They were treating people there, and they didn't provide any safeguards. When the board passed the curative amendment, the theory was that we'll have more control over over this operation. But in order for there to be control, there has to be an applicant and an owner that are going to comply with conditions. Mr. Schlim has had a long history of not just ignoring, but disobeying federal, state, and local law. When he was a sales broker, stockbroker, he was disciplined by the Securities Exchange Commission for misrepresentation, something which he has done to this board. So he violated federal law. By operating a treatment facility at the inn, he violated state law and was cited by the appropriate agency for that. He was given a building permit, a zoning permit to operate as an inn. From the testimony presented, it was anything but an inn. He was operating a medical facility in clear violation of what the definition of an inn is in the ordinance. And he will continue to just simply disregard any conditions, any laws, ordinances, as long as he gets what he wants. He has absolutely no regard for the welfare of the people in the surrounding neighborhood, nor the residents of the township, nor the ordinances and laws of the township. Thank you.
I'll be brief. Obviously, I endorse both the closings of Marshall and Jim. I'll focus on one slightly different issue. We were able to admit the Department of Drug and Alcohol inspection. If you read that, you'll see it was a joint inspection in conjunction with the Department of Human Services Mental Health Division. And the reason for that, as was admitted to by Mr. Schlimm, is the facility, the Water Gap Wellness Center facility, in a zone for that, is in fact licensed by Human Services as a mental health treatment center. And Mr. Schlimm admitted that obviously in some cases you have people with substance abuse problems that have mental health problems. But he admitted there were people being treated just for mental health problems. And it was also, I think, clear to everybody that if this license is granted, if this conditional use is granted, he intends to do that at the wellness center as well. Now, the conditional use, the whole premise of the curative amendment, the whole premise of everything up to now, including the conditional use, was that this was only a drug and alcohol rehab center. But we now see, as consistent with Mr. Schlimm's operation and what you've heard so much of, there's an additional use being added, a use that was permitted, and in fact is permitted now in your gateway district, and we believe was certainly permitted in your previous B1 district. He's adding the mental health treatment use. Presumably he's doing that because it's more profitable. There's an old saying that adversity reveals character. When Mr. Schlimm did not immediately get what he wanted, he could have simply opened the outpatient center, which we did not object to because he was in a zone that was permitted. But no, he had to go for the maximum utilization. He had to go for the maximum profit. He had to attempt to operate a treatment center improperly, illegally at the end, where he was, according to the Drug and Alcohol / Human Services Inspection, providing counseling. And by the way, Mr. Schlimm's testimony was that that occurred only on the one day. And by some amazing coincidence, it was the one day that the inspection occurred. Well, you can decide how credible you believe that to be, okay? Especially when it's clear that the medication was being dispensed and supervised every single day at the medication prescribed for treatment. This was a controlled environment. Mr. Schlimm has shown you his character, which is that he will take a mile anytime he thinks he can. He will add the mental health unit. He will bend the rules. As Mr. Lobenheim correctly said, this was a shakedown cruise. And we've seen that the ship is the Titanic. I definitely believe there's adequate grounds to deny this use. And if not, I endorse the conditions that Jim presented here.
Mr. Wolf, any rebuttal?
I don't have any specific rebuttal unless the supervisors have any questions, at this time.
I only have one question, just because I didn't get the chance to ask earlier. So I understand that the outpatient facility was not intended, and that's why a lot of these adverse effects are happening. But we're still to believe that the outpatient facility will still be open, even if granted conditional use to have the residential aspect?
I believe that's,
Outpatient means just that. It's an outpatient. You can live wherever you want and go to that facility. There's a huge shortage of services for drug addiction on a PHP level. PHP is just a
most intense form of outpatient, intense meaning 6 hours or 5 hours minimum. Then there's outpatient, which is 1 to 3 hours a week. So, yeah, we want to continue to offer it because there's a lot of people that need that service.
Would there still be significant transportation? And I don't mean significant in that there's as much traffic as a country club, because that would simply not be true. But is there going to be routine daily trips on the same magnitude of what's happening now between the two?
No, not at all. The people who would be attending substance THC, they can't co-reside, if you will,
right,
with people in a residential treatment facility.
Okay, and can I assume that, I don't know, potentially there's more staff that's going to handle the outpatient to adequately segregate the two? Or is it going to be largely the same staff?
People who are in outpatient treatment, they still go to work.
No, I understand that. I mean the staff. I mean, you know, your chief medical officer is his primary office. Is he going to split his time between the two?
We could have two, you know, chief medical officers, 2 psychiatrists, you know, so, you know, initially it's all we had, and then probably would split his time between the two.
Do any of my colleagues have any other questions?
All right, so hearing none, then as I was going to say earlier, you have the option of closing the hearing. Under that scenario, the matter will, the 45 days on the case will begin, for me to write an opinion, will begin to run. However, you can keep the record open if you want to, but I think you've heard a lot of information here. You may want to close the record. As I said, come back in a week to 10 days and render your oral decision, which gives you an opportunity to consider the matter and consider whether it should be denied, it should be granted, it should be granted with conditions, et cetera. And as long as it's done within the next week to 10 days, I still have a month to write the opinion. And unless something goes south on me, I should be okay with that time. The bugaboo we have here, which we haven't raised earlier, and I'm going to raise it now, is we have an appeal from the decision of this board to allow and grant the municipal curative amendment to allow a conditional use to be in this district. What if we go through all of these machinations and the court says, you know what, they're right, it should never have been allowed in that district? Now what? We've spent all this time and effort. So I was thinking about it coming up here. Maybe the township should have filed an appeal to stay this matter before it even began until that decision comes down. But keep that in mind. That decision could affect whatever we decide to do here. And of course, the applicant would have to then, if it's granted with conditions or if it's denied with conditions, either side would then have to decide what they want to do, at their own risk. But keep that in mind. That's still pending. Our brief isn't due for another 2 weeks yet.
Right. So I'd like to propose something to my colleagues. I think everybody in this matter deserves a degree of finality to this. We have heard this over and over again between a number of different hearings. The content has not changed. I can say that having been here as a candidate and now as a sitting supervisor, it's largely just any other additions and rehashing what we've heard before. I can't deny that I haven't heard anything that's troubled me, but I also cannot let merely my emotions make this decision for me either. We have to consult with all aspects of the law. So, being as we have the conditions from Mr. Ferrari, some provided also from our own research, and Mr. Karasek, I'd like to take a final vote and consider, and then consider conditions if that's the case. At our work session on Tuesday, February 9th, and we'd have to advertise that as a special portion, but I don't see any reason for this to continue. I'd like to close testimony at this point, close the record.
Mr. Chair, when you say the work session Tuesday the 9th, what time would that be?
That would also be at 4 o'clock.
Okay. Because I just want to state this for the record, the new chair, the work sessions are not going to be Wednesdays anymore. They're generally going to be 4 p.m. before the regular meeting at 7 p.m. So that's sort of how it's going, unless something special occurs.
Well, right, because our second Tuesday meetings are non-voting work sessions, and this would be the only matter I want voted on that night. I don't want to vote on any other matter, so we'd have to advertise it as such, and then our regular meetings are our fourth Tuesday meeting.
So, the question is, to the board, do you want to do what the chairman is requesting, which is, I'm assuming, closing the hearing tonight?
Correct.
And then rescheduling the matter for Tuesday, February 9 at 4 p.m. for a vote on the use?
Brian Barrett again. The conditions themselves we're going to have to take a look at, that's for sure. We'll have the time to do it, as Jacob said. But the planning commission, are they involved with what they proposed and submitted as conditions after they had their hearing?
And this is Ron, Brian, and the answer is no. They've looked at this. They had their review of this matter on December 2nd before your hearing, I believe, at 7 o'clock, at 4 o'clock, at 3 o'clock. They reviewed this matter, and they provided their own conditions. So
right. Is that going to be included? Are we going to try to incorporate their recommended, if you will, conditions?
That's up to the board. You've got basically 5 areas of conditions. You have the conditions that are part of that hillside pyramid case from Middle Smithfield.
Right.
You'd want to look at that for some guidance. You have the conditions from Coach Dowd. You have conditions from the applicants, or not the applicant, I'm sorry, from the objectors or protestants. I scribbled down some conditions that I can submit to you for review. So that's 4 anyway. And you got the planning commission conditions. So all of that has to be sat down and looked at to try to determine if you're going to grant the use. That's the first question. If you're not, then Mr. Ferrari is correct, and you don't need to get into conditions. But if you're going to grant the use, then you need to look at all those conditions and try to figure out what are the best of the bunch. And
you bet, and no redundancy, I guess, Ron, also.
Right, yeah. So, and that's why I'm suggesting, and at least I believe the chair is suggesting, that we give the board, basically a week or so to be able to consider what was said, consider conditions, and then come out at the meeting on the 9th, or I'm sorry, was it the 9th?
Correct.
Yes, meeting on the 9th to then make your vote. So.
Okay.
1 second, sir. Okay, Robert, how do you feel about that?
I'll make a motion to make a final decision on February 9th.
And you're making a motion to close the record at this time, too?
Yeah.
Okay, do it. Hold on, I'll take public comment before we vote, Jack. Okay.
A quick point of order. Mr. Lowenheim, it was, the hillside was in a C1 zone. The Brookdale on the Lake is in a resort type zone. Neither one was an R1 at this point.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I hear a second to Mr. Lowenheim's motion?
I'll make that I'll second that motion.
All right, now we have to take public comment, Ron.
Yeah, see if there's any comment. We already have one from, I think that was the mayor, or Mr.
Oh, God, the mayor's got, yeah.
That was Mr. Shoemaker, sorry. So let's see who else may want to make a comment, if anyone. Whether on Zoom or in the room. And if not, then you can vote.
Okay, anyone on Zoom? I'd like, to hear some no's before I call for the vote.
No comment.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Marshall.
Marshall.
Okay. Seeing no public comment, all in favor of Mr. Lowenheim's motion?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries.
Now, Jacob, you're saying now that we're going to meet again in February, correct?
Before I call for the vote.
Yes, these are public comments?
Excuse me, being no public comment.
Are there, can they hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me, okay. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please continue before we conclude this. Is this?
I'm sorry, yes, this is Nefertiti Campbell. I just wanted to briefly state or restate basically everything that has been discussed regarding the center being there next door. I just want to reiterate and stress that this has been difficult, this whole situation, everything the way that it has been. I'm disturbed by lies. I don't like to be lied to. I don't like to lie to other people. And I feel that throughout this process, we have been deeply lied to about what is going on, and the level of trust that we should have with the center next door does not exist. And I would really hope that the supervisors of Smithfield Township could really think about all of these things in combination, the behaviors of Mr. Schlim and how he's been managing himself, his past acts, and what this could possibly lead to in the future. I am really concerned for my family, and I don't want to live this way, constantly being worried about what's going to be happening next door with everything that has actually been occurring. So I would just ask that you think about all these things, and do you want to have a relationship with someone who lies and who doesn't seem to want to follow the rules, and have inspections, and just think about all those things and what it will mean for you in the future in the event there is a problem up there. I really hope there isn't.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. At this point, I'm going to consider that the public record closed, as that was just a minor exception. So we're going to move on to portions of our agenda at this point. So we'll give you a couple moments to gather your gather your things before we proceed.
Yeah, one question, because,
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, no, you can. I'll take it. Just put it on the table. All right. Thank you. So I know. I was going to say put it on the table because we have a bucket in my office.
Thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home.
Yes, thank you. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank everybody for their time.
I may have it floating around here. Maybe you don't get it like within a day, so just call me or send me an email or because I've got so much on my plate that I can't even begin to think sometimes, so. Yeah, I'm sure you do, so I'll do that and I'll be happy to shoot it along, okay?
Peter? Peter?
Yes, thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Safe trip home.
All right, you guys take care, like I said. If you have another meeting tonight, just be safe. I may. We'll see. But that's okay. We were here last night too. We were almost at 10 here last night. Yeah, that was your regular meeting.
Cool. That last night, I can't remember one day.
Little white knuckles going over the mountain back and forth, but I made it.
You had the big truck.
Yeah, I had my wife's car, so I was good.
You have that Lincoln?
No, I had my wife's car. She has Thank you. No question about it.
Thank you.
We had the larger work set last night.
Good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
How we have the room.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, take care.
See you.
Okay.
Sounds good. Be safe, Jim.
Thank you very much.
What? We okay?
Yeah, we're okay now.
All right, so you want to go to new business?
Yeah, okay, so we're gonna go into A, which is considering the, awarding the asphalt paver bid. Julia, do you wanna talk about the bids we received?
Sure. So bids were opened on January 21st at 1 p.m. Our low bidder was Stevenson Equipment, which came in at a bid price for the used paver at $34,500. We received a second bid from Highway Equipment for $171,000 and, $171,000 and 65. I can't see. $171,000 and 65. Geez. So tonight, we are here to entertain to accept the Stevenson Equipment bid for $34,000 and $34,500.
I'll make the motion, we accept the Stevenson bid.
I assume our roadmaster approves of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both of
Yeah.
these contingent upon our roadmaster reviewing the equipment. He has looked over the Stevenson piece, says that we are good to go, and we are good to make the purchase.
I'll second Brian's motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Barrett, second by Mr. Levenheim, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is considering the appointment of Jacob Schrey from Hanover Engineering as our alternate sewage enforcement officer. This came upon us because, one, we need an alternate, and two, because you don't necessarily appoint a firm when you appoint an SEO, you appoint an individual. So I understand that our current SEO, Scott, I forget his last name, Scott Brown has introduced us to Mr. Schrey.
Yes, I met with him, and we'll have to talk about this later. We're scheduled for the February 9th meeting to discuss other SEO matters. But we can appoint two SEOs from the same firm. And this would satisfy a requirement to have an SEO and an alternate SEO, which we currently do not have.
Yep.
Okay, I'll make a motion to appoint Jacob Schrey of Hanover Engineering as alternate sewage enforcement officer.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Levenheim, second by Mr. Barrett, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Now, this one is not on the agenda, but it was part of the follow-up that Julia had sent us from our meeting last night, which is that we did not articulate the date of the expiration of the term for Ms. Timko for the sewer authority. So I'd like to move that we clarify that appointment ends on January 6, 2025, which fills that vacancy. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Levenheim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and motion carries. We do not have any bills to be paid,
Oh.
and it looks like does anybody else have anything before we proceed to public comment?
No, I have nothing.
No. Okay. Is there any public comment? I understand we have one gentleman that's still on our Zoom. Okay, hearing none and seeing no one else in the audience, I move that we adjourn this meeting at 6:04. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Done.
Okay. Awesome. Meeting is adjourned.
John, do you want to
Jacob, are we on?